You were never too sensitive. You were simply awake in a world that profits from your numbness. You noticed things others didn't. The tone shift in a friend's voice, the way someone pauses before giving you half-honest praise, the smiles that don't quite reach their eyes. You felt the tremors in the room before the words ever landed. And when you voiced it, when you said, "Something feels off," they told you were imagining things. Too emotional, too dramatic. You learned to second-guess yourself. Over time, that doubt didn't just live in your mind, it moved into your body. Your shoulders curled inward. Your jaw stayed tight. You walked away from interactions feeling like you'd done something wrong, though you couldn't name what. And when you tried to explain it, you sounded paranoid. Maybe it's me, you thought, but it wasn't. Carl Jung knew long before modern language gave us the tools that people who haven't faced their own shadow, their repressed pain, guilt, shame, and desire, will inevitably hurt others. Not with raised voices or bruises, but with subtle manipulations, emotional distance, strategic silence, disappearing when you're most vulnerable. And if you haven't seen your own patterns, if you haven't made the unconscious conscious, you'll keep walking straight into those dynamics thinking they're normal, thinking they're love. That's why Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Let's begin with the first truth. Truth 1, if you don't define your value, others will discount it. Every time you say it's fine when it's not, every time you smile when your heart is tired, you are silently telling the world my worth is flexible. Your needs are not an inconvenience, but if you treat them like they are, others will too. Imagine a friend who always pays for dinner. At first, it's generous. Over time, if it's never reciprocated, it becomes expected. The same goes for emotional generosity. When you keep giving without boundaries, you stop being valued, you become a convenience. Truth 2, the people who benefit from your silence will always call your truth selfish. As soon as you begin to speak up, the backlash begins. Suddenly, you're too intense, hard to be around. But it's not your truth that bothers them, it's that your compliance can no longer be exploited. They miss the version of you that swallowed discomfort, so they wouldn't have to feel theirs. Truth 3, the shadow isn't evil, it's just unexpressed power. That fire in your gut when you're disrespected, that impulse to scream when someone walks all over you, that's not rage gone wrong. That's your protector, your shadow. Jung believed the shadow holds the parts of us. Society taught us to fear anger, lust, power, pride. But these are also the parts that protect, create, and defend. You were taught to feel ashamed of your shadow, to suppress it. But your shadow is not your enemy, it's your missing strength. Truth 4, people don't respond to what you say, they respond to what you tolerate. You can say, "Don't treat me like that." But if you stay when they do it again, you've answered louder through your actions than your words ever could. Boundaries are only boundaries when they're enforced. Think of a child pushing limits. If no is followed by no consequence, it becomes permission. Adults do the same thing. The test isn't if you say no, it's whether you live it. Truth 5, every apology you give for your pain is a lesson in self-erasure. Sorry, I'm just tired. Sorry if that was too much. Sorry for feeling like this. Jung would ask, why are you apologizing for being human? We live in a culture where discomfort is treated like a crime, where vulnerability is marketed as weakness. But pain is data. If you can't express your pain, you lose access to your truth. And without truth, the self begins to disappear. Truth 6. Trauma teaches you to see love in the shape of your survival. If as a child, love meant pleasing, fixing, adapting, then as an adult, you'll seek out people who make you do the same. You won't even know it's happening. It'll just feel right. That's the trap. It's not real love, it's familiar pain dressed in the language of connection. This is why some people mistake anxiety for excitement, why silence feels like safety, and why chaos feels like home. Truth 7. If someone's love requires you to betray yourself, it's not love, it's a deal. It's a silent contract. You stay small, and I'll stay close. You smile when you're aching, and I'll stay comfortable. But every yes you say to what wounds you is a no to yourself. And that's not love, that's a slow death. Truth 8. The mask you wear to be loved becomes your prison, your chill persona, your always available energy, your curated likability. At first it works. You get invited, you get praised. But over time, you start to forget what you actually enjoy, what you actually want. You become a character in someone else's story, and your own identity begins to fade. Truth 9. Emotional labor without reciprocity is exploitation. You listen, you hold space, you comfort, you explain, you forgive. And what do you get in return? People mistake emotional generosity for emotional obligation. And when love only flows in one direction, it doesn't nourish, it drains. That's not connection, that's depletion. Truth 10. You teach people how to treat you by what you allow twice. The first time, maybe they didn't know. The second time, they knew, but they also knew you'd let it slide. Silence is not neutrality. It's instruction. Jung said the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. But accepting yourself also means protecting yourself, even from people you once loved. Let's take a breath here. I want to tell you about a girl, soft-spoken, a master of making herself small. She was the peacekeeper, the one who got overlooked in groups, who let others interrupt her mid-sentence, who laughed at jokes that left her feeling hollow. One day, someone raised their voice, a friend, a loved one. The words were subtle but sharp. In the past, she would have smiled and swallowed it. But this time, something different happened. She stood up, looked them in the eye, and said, "Don't speak to me like that." Then she walked out. Her hands trembled, her heart raced. But something had shifted, something sacred. That wasn't anger. That was individuation, the process Jung called the birth of the true self. She buried the version of her who thought pain was the price of love. And something new rose in her place, a person no longer willing to trade her soul for belonging. Now let me ask you, when did you first learn that being quiet was safer than being honest? Was it your parents' face when you cried? A teacher who rolled their eyes when you asked why? A friend who left the moment you showed too much? That was the moment your real voice went underground. And from that day forward, people could hurt you gently because the part of you meant to scream had gone quiet. But here's the beautiful thing. It's not gone forever. These first 10 truths aren't weapons, they're keys. They're meant to help you unlock the part of you that always knew something was off. The part that's been whispering from beneath the mask. There's more. There's something real. Don't forget me. And now we continue with the next set of truths. Truths about discernment, projection boundaries, and the power of no. You've started this journey, and it only gets clearer from here. Let's return to where we left off. The lies you were told weren't shouted, they were whispered through repetition. That your needs are too much, that your voice is dangerous, that discomfort should be swallowed. But Carl Jung didn't just study the mind, he studied the soul beneath it. And he saw that unhealed people unconsciously teach others to self-abandon just to maintain connection. Now let's continue with the next set of truths. These are harder to digest because they challenge not just what people did to you, but what you accepted in order to feel loved. Truth 11. Not everyone who understands you deserves access to you. Some of the most manipulative people are fluent in your pain. They mirror your childhood. They see your patterns. They finish your sentences. But insight without integrity is a trap. They don't want to love you, they want to study you. And the moment you confuse recognition for safety, you let someone hold your heart who has no intention of protecting it. Just because someone sees your soul doesn't mean they should hold it. Truth 12. You're not too sensitive, you're finally listening to your nervous system. That flutter in your gut when they lie. That foggy feeling after certain conversations. That ache in your chest when you're around someone who loves you but constantly confuses you. That's not anxiety. That's your truth trying to surface. Your body remembers what your mind tries to forget. It speaks in fatigue and tension, in the sudden urge to run. Sensitivity isn't weakness, it's wisdom you haven't learned to trust yet. Truth 13. Loyalty to dysfunction isn't virtue, it's trauma. You stay, you explain, you forgive, and you call it compassion. But Jung would ask, are you loyal? Or are you afraid? Afraid of abandonment, afraid of guilt, afraid that if you finally walk away, there'll be no one left. But loyalty to someone who harms you is not love, it's just a learned survival tactic from a time when you didn't know better. Now you do. Truth 14. If someone only loves you when you're easy to love, it's not love, it's convenience. The moment you cry, the moment you set a boundary, the moment you say I need more, they pull away, they ghost, they sulk, they punish. That's not rejection, that's exposure. They were never in it for the real you. They were in it for the agreeable version of you, the one who didn't ask for anything. Truth 15. Over-explaining is a trauma response wearing the mask of clarity. You explain your no 3 different ways. You rehearse texts. You write paragraphs justifying a basic boundary. But it's not about being understood, it's about being safe. Somewhere inside, you learned that being clear would make you unlovable. So now instead of setting boundaries with calm, you defend them like you're on trial. But here's the truth, real love doesn't need a closing argument. Let me pause and tell you a different kind of story. There's a man, let's call him David. Always the strong one, the calm one. Grew up in a house where his emotions were too loud for his father, too inconvenient for his mother. So he learned to manage them alone. He becomes the one everyone counts on. The friend who fixes, the partner who listens, the coworker who volunteers. He never complains, until one day he can't breathe. Not physically, existentially. He looks around and realizes he's disappeared. His days revolve around maintaining peace for everyone but himself. And when he finally says, "I'm not okay," people say he's acting strange, distant, ungrateful. That's when he realizes he was only ever valued for his silence. So he does something radical. He stops explaining. He says, "I can't make it." He says, "I need rest." He says no. And just like that, his life fractures. Some people leave, others lash out. But what's left, it's real. It's peaceful. It's earned. This is what Jung meant by individuation. The process of becoming whole, not liked, not understood. Whole. Let's keep going. Truth 16. Healing will make you unrecognizable to people who only knew you wounded. They'll say you've changed, and they'll be right. But what they mean is, you're no longer easy to manipulate. The version of you that tolerated breadcrumbs, that apologized for crying, that feared abandonment, that version is gone. And in its place stands someone unbothered by being misunderstood. Truth 17. If your love doesn't grow, it dies. Love isn't a static noun, it's a living verb. It needs room to evolve. And when one person heals while the other stays rooted in old patterns, disconnection is inevitable. Most relationships don't end from betrayal. They end from inertia. Truth 18. People fear your boundaries when they benefited from your lack of them. You start speaking up, saying not today, not explaining, not engaging. Suddenly you're guarded, cold, selfish. But here's what they really mean, you're no longer manageable. Truth 19. When you stop over-explaining, manipulators go silent. They thrive on confusion. They love the endless back and forth, the drama disguised as dialogue. But once you say, "This is my line," and walk away, they're left with nothing to argue against. You've ended the play and they have no more lines. Truth 20. Empathy without boundaries is self-destruction. You've felt their pain. You've absorbed their stories. You've forgiven before they even apologized. But Jung taught the archetype of the healer must learn restraint. If your empathy becomes a currency they spend to buy your silence, it's not healing, it's harm. To them and to you. Let's take a breath again. Think of your younger self. The version of you who sat quietly in class, afraid to raise their hand. The one who stayed in friendships that mocked your sensitivity. The one who thought being chosen meant being quiet. That version of you doesn't need more protection. They need permission to speak, to scream, to say, "I don't like that." Because your voice isn't dangerous. Your silence was. These next truths will walk us deeper into projection, emotional boundaries, and the invisible ways empathy is weaponized. But if you've made it this far, you already know something vital. You were never broken. You were just surviving. And now you're learning to live. You've begun to reclaim the parts of yourself you once abandoned in order to survive. That's no small thing. You're not just setting boundaries, you're building a new reality. And with every truth you embody, the world around you reshapes itself. Not always easily, not without resistance. But truth has a way of clearing the room of what no longer belongs. Let's keep going. Truth 21. The desire to be understood can make you tolerate the intolerable. You keep explaining. You try to make them see. You speak gently, then urgently, then desperately. But the issue was never your clarity. The issue was their comfort. Some people don't misunderstand you by accident. They do it by design because understanding you would mean having to take responsibility. And they're not ready for that. Truth 22. When someone gets offended by your boundary, you've exposed their entitlement. A healthy person adjusts when you say, "That hurts." An unhealthy one reacts with guilt, trips anger, or withdrawal. If someone flips the script, makes your need feel like a threat, that's not love being challenged. That's control being interrupted. Truth 23. You are not responsible for the emotional responses of people you've outgrown. They may be upset, they may feel abandoned, but that doesn't mean you've done something wrong. Growth often triggers guilt, but guilt is not a compass. It's a ghost. It shows up when you do something different than what your programming expected, and your programming was built for survival, not self-respect. Truth 24. People don't leave when you become toxic. They leave when you become self-respecting. It's a bitter irony. You spend years accommodating. They stay. You start choosing yourself. They disappear, not because you became cruel, but because they were only loyal to your compliance. Truth 25. Your triggers aren't flaws. They're flashlights. The next time someone calls you too reactive, pause. Ask yourself, what memory just got touched? Jung believed every strong emotional reaction is a messenger from the unconscious. A trigger is not the enemy, it's a teacher. It points to what's unfinished, unhealed, or unspoken. Truth 26. Projection is when someone accuses you of what they refuse to see in themselves. You ask for space. They call you selfish. You express a boundary. They say you're manipulative. You ask for the bare minimum. They act like you've demanded the world. They aren't describing you. They're revealing the parts of themselves they're too ashamed to meet. Truth 27. Some people are addicted to your dysfunction because it validates their own. You were easier to be around when you were unsure, when you overgave, when you played the fixer. The moment you stop playing that role, they squirm. Your clarity is a mirror and they don't like what it reflects. Truth 28. When someone withdraws love as punishment, it was never love, it was leverage. Have you ever said no and felt the room go cold? That's not love being lost. That's power being removed. When love disappears the moment you become inconvenient, it wasn't love. It was a contract. You behave, and I stay. Truth 29. You don't have to explain your boundary. You only have to enforce it. They'll demand reasons. They'll push for logic. They'll twist your words. But your boundary isn't a debate. It's a locked door. You don't need a speech. You need to walk away. Truth 30. You don't owe anyone access to an old version of you. Maybe you used to chase. Maybe you used to tolerate. Maybe you used to smile through pain. That version is gone. And if someone misses who you used to be, that's not grief. That's resistance. Let them miss what was. You don't have to resurrect it for their comfort. Let me show you something deeper. Something that doesn't get said enough. Every human being carries a psychological frequency. A signal. And that signal isn't just words or actions, it's identity. If your internal identity says I have to earn love, you'll keep attracting people who make you prove it. If your inner belief says, my needs are a burden, you'll keep landing in relationships where your needs are treated like burdens. The universe doesn't respond to your words. It responds to your self-concept. This is why Jung placed so much importance on the unconscious. Because it's not what you consciously want, it's what you unconsciously believe you deserve that builds the architecture of your life. Let's go further. Truth 31. Your peace will agitate those who relied on your chaos. You used to spiral. You used to overthink. You used to call explain fix. Now you sit in silence. You protect your peace. You no longer bite the bait. They'll poke, they'll accuse, they'll escalate. But you've become calm, and your calm feels like abandonment to those who depended on your emotional labor. Truth 32. If you have to beg someone to understand you, they're not listening, they're avoiding. Love doesn't need essays. If someone keeps misunderstanding you after you've been clear, they're not confused, they're avoiding accountability. Truth 33. Some people don't want healing, they want dominance. They prolong conflict, they twist the narrative, they derail every repair attempt, not to find resolution but to retain control. Jung warned that when someone fears their own unconscious, they try to control yours. And that control shows up as gaslighting, triangulation, and endless arguments that go nowhere. Truth 34. The most dangerous form of gaslighting is the one you do to yourself. Maybe I'm overthinking. Maybe I am too sensitive. Maybe it was my fault. But stop. Ask yourself who taught you that your pain was excessive. Where did you learn that self-doubt was safer than self-trust? You weren't born with that voice. It was installed. Truth 35, self-abandonment wears many masks: loyalty, love, sacrifice, even spirituality. You say, I'm just being kind, but behind that kindness is erasure. If you disappear to keep peace, it's not virtue, it's trauma dressed up as goodness. Let's pause again. I want you to imagine yourself at the edge of a forest. Behind you, the old life, the one where you smiled through disrespect, where you hoped your silence would earn you love, where you apologized for existing too loudly. Ahead of you, a quieter path. Not peaceful because it's easy, but peaceful because it's true. No more acting, no more performing, just presence. Jung called this the sacred task of the individual, to separate from the collective illusions and step into authenticity. Not as rebellion, but as birth. So take a deep breath. You're not just unlearning behaviors. You're rewiring the gravitational pull of your life. You're shifting from survival to sovereignty. And now the final set of truths is waiting. The ones about sacred self-respect, the quiet dignity of walking away, and the miracle of not needing permission to be whole. Let's finish strong. You've come a long way. You've unmasked old wounds, named hidden patterns, and walked into the uncomfortable light of truth. But the deepest healing isn't loud. It doesn't happen in big declarations or dramatic exits. It happens in the stillness, when you no longer feel the need to explain, prove, or plead. The final truths are not about protection anymore. They're about sovereignty, dignity, power without aggression, peace without apology. Let's keep going. Truth 36. You are not difficult. You are simply done self-destructing quietly. Let them call you hard, guarded, moody. Let them say you've changed, because you have. You are no longer twisting yourself into something digestible for people who don't even know how to nourish themselves. You're no longer a contortionist in the circus of someone else's comfort. You are allowed to take up space without needing to earn it. Truth 37. People who never had boundaries will always see yours as cruelty. You say that doesn't work for me, and suddenly you're cold, harsh, aggressive. But here's the thing, your clarity isn't the problem. Their discomfort with limits is. You weren't born to explain emotional regulation to grown adults. You were born to live your truth, quietly, powerfully. Truth 38. Manipulators confuse empathy with access. You listen, you validate, you care, and they assume that means I get to stay in your life, no matter what I do. But empathy is not a contract. Understanding someone doesn't require you to carry their pain forever. You can hold compassion in your heart and still lock the door. Truth 39. You can love someone deeply and still choose yourself completely. This one's hard. You think, if I leave, does that mean I didn't love them? But love and leaving are not opposites. Sometimes the most sacred act of love for yourself and for them is walking away before your spirit breaks. Jung taught that wholeness isn't achieved by cutting away the people who hurt us. It's achieved by integrating the lesson they were sent to teach. Truth 40. If your absence bothers them more than your pain ever did, it was never love, it was dependency. They don't miss you. They miss the version of you who didn't ask for anything. The version who bent, softened, dimmed herself for their comfort. Real love doesn't panic when you grow. It adapts, it honors. But dependency crumbles the moment you say, I need more. Truth 41. The more healed you become, the more boring you'll be to people addicted to drama. You stop reacting, you stop defending, you stop playing the game. They say you've changed. And you smile because yes, you have. You no longer find chaos romantic. You no longer find inconsistency exciting. You no longer confuse adrenaline with love. Your nervous system now values peace over passion. Truth 42. If their version of love requires your exhaustion, it's not love, it's performance. You're not on stage. You don't have to earn care. You don't have to constantly prove your worth by being the most available, the most accommodating, the most forgiving. Love isn't a role you audition for. It's a presence you receive with ease. Truth. Some people bond through wounds, not values, and when you heal, the bond breaks. They were trauma twins, chaos companions, people who got you because they shared your pain. But once you stop bleeding, they don't know where to find you. They didn't love your wholeness, they loved your brokenness. And when you stitch yourself back together, they call you distant. That's not betrayal, that's clarity. Truth 44. The final form of self-respect is walking away quietly without needing to be understood. You don't need a dramatic finale. You don't need them to say sorry. You don't need a long message telling you how much they've changed. You just leave. You block the number. You stop rereading the texts. You make your tea, you open the window, you breathe. That's it. Let me show you what that moment looks like. You wake up one morning and realize you don't feel that itch anymore. That pull to check your phone. That urge to rehearse conversations in your head. That cycle of asking, was it really that bad? You just stop, not out of spite, not out of numbness, but because clarity finally came home. You realize the apology never came. The loyalty was always conditional. The connection was built on your silence, not your truth. And instead of spiraling, you feel something sacred. Stillness. You get dressed slower. You walk differently. You take up space in your own life. Not to prove anything, but because you belong here. You don't chase. You don't shrink. You don't rehearse your existence for someone else's approval. This is the moment Jung was pointing to when he said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." But he also knew that privilege comes with a cost. The cost is grief. The cost is letting go of every role you were taught to play. The cost is disappointing people who only loved your mask. You'll lose the ones who needed you pliable. You'll lose the ones who feared your voice. But you'll gain something irreplaceable, a self you don't have to abandon to feel loved. So ask yourself this right now. What is the cost of staying small? Of biting your tongue so others feel big? Of calling silence safety when really it's self-neglect? You've been taught to fear the consequences of honesty. But what about the consequences of erasure? What about the price of a life lived in fragments? When you know these 44 truths, not just intellectually, but in your nervous system, you'll stop confusing connection with survival. You'll stop thinking exhaustion is a virtue. You'll stop bleeding to prove you're good. You'll just be whole, complete, unshakable. Not because people changed, but because you did. And now in the final part, we'll slow down and breathe together. Not to add more truths, but to live in them. To rest in what you've reclaimed. To learn what life feels like when you're no longer available for suffering in silence. Let's meet there. Let's slow everything down now. You've crossed a threshold that many never reach. Not because they're incapable, but because it's terrifying. The moment you realize that truth costs comfort, that clarity demands solitude, that healing asks you to grieve not only people, but entire versions of yourself. And yet here you are, still standing, still breathing. Now it's time to settle into something even deeper than truth. Wholeness. Let's step into the final space together. No more revelations, just integration. Let's walk through it gently. You used to wake up anxious, remember scanning your mind like a battlefield. Did I say something wrong? Did I upset them? Are they pulling away? You thought hypervigilance was intuition, but it was fear. You don't live there anymore. You no longer write paragraphs to explain a two-word boundary. You don't shrink your voice to protect someone else's ego. You don't apologize for needing rest space, silence, solitude. You don't owe the world constant access. You're allowed to take time, to take up space, to take care of yourself first. You are no longer a rescue project. Not for lovers, not for friends, not for family. You don't need to be understood by the people who benefited from your confusion. You don't need to fix the stories they tell about you after you leave. You don't need closure from someone who was never honest to begin with. Here's what healing feels like now. You say no and don't explain. You walk away from the table when love starts tasting like obligation. You lose interest in being liked by people you no longer respect. You laugh quieter. You breathe deeper. You move slower. You start paying attention to how your body feels after being around certain people, and you adjust accordingly. You don't second-guess your intuition. You don't ignore the tightness in your chest. You don't negotiate with red flags. You've buried the version of yourself who begged to be chosen, who molded herself into someone palatable, who confused tolerance with love, and in her place, a woman or man who no longer apologizes for being whole. Carl Jung never promised that this path would be easy. He never said healing would be linear or neat. In fact, he warned us that individuation, the process of becoming your truest self, requires a symbolic death. The death of illusions, the death of roles, the death of being nice at the cost of being real. But on the other side, you're not perfect. You're not invincible. But you are free. Free from the need to be everything for everyone. Free from over-explaining your sensitivity. Free from performing peace when you're drowning in disconnection. You're not available for performative selflessness anymore. You're not available for text messages that drain calls, that guilt-trip conversations that circle but never connect. You're not interested in trauma bonding anymore. You're not romanticizing your pain. You're no longer mistaking chaos for chemistry. You're available for mutuality, for presence, for peace. You speak less, but everything you say is honest. You do less, but everything you do is real. You expect less from people, but more from yourself. You are not afraid to disappoint people, because you've learned some people only liked you because you were easy to use. Now, you've become difficult to manipulate, and that to them feels like betrayal. Let it. You were never meant to be an emotional landfill for people who refuse to clean up their own lives. You are not here to make others feel better about staying asleep. You are here to rise, to rest, to rebuild, to return to yourself. No mask, no performance, no more living in a constant audition for love. Just you. And if some people don't like that, you've finally made peace with being misunderstood. Because silence is no longer submission, it's sovereignty. And solitude is no longer emptiness, it's alignment. And stillness is no longer punishment, it's power. So here you are, at the end of 44 truths, but not the end of the journey. Because truth is not a destination, it's a practice. Every day you will be tempted to go back, to be agreeable, to be liked, to overgive, to over-explain. But now you'll notice it. Now you'll pause. Now you'll choose differently. And that Jung would say is the beginning of freedom. You are not who you were. You're not who they wanted you to be. You're who you choose to become moment by moment. Rooted, calm, clear, not loud, but unmistakably whole. Let that be enough. Let you be enough. Now turn off your screen. Breathe in, breathe out. Feel your feet on the ground. And remember, you never had to become anything. You just had to stop abandoning who you already are. You're not here to be less. You're here to be true. End of script. Have a beautiful day.